Hi, everybody. Andrea Fair here with Flying Free Ministries. I'm so excited to get to introduce to you Stacey Greene. Hi, Stacey.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
You betcha. And where are you living?
I am in Ohio. I am in the Cleveland area on the east side in a kind of a farm slash rural area that I just love, about 20 miles east of Cleveland.
Excellent. Yep. I'm out here in near Sexsmith, Alberta. Definitely a rural area out here too. So
Yeah.
that's what I love.
Yep.
Stacey, how many books have you written?
So I've written two books. The first one is the one we're talking about forgiveness, and the second one is a book about dealing with grief.
Okay. Wow. Cool. I didn't realize that. That's super
Yeah.
pertinent. Wow. Have you always loved writing?
I have, but it's kind of funny. I'm more of a tomboy, outdoor kind of kid. I never really concentrated on grades or enjoyed school very much and just did the bare minimum. But I did always write a journal. For some odd reason, ever since I was 11, I've loved writing down every facet of my life as if it was some exciting thing, even if it's pretty mundane. So I have always kept a journal, which actually helped me when it was time to write the grief book because I could go back in history and kind of relive some of the things I was writing about.
Wow. Yeah. Which would be totally difficult, but at the same time, helpful to have that in front of you too. Hey? Hmm.
Very healing, very, very healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, both books.
Yeah. I bet. I can see also, I was just thinking actually, just before we got on here, how God's always preparing us for the next thing. Hey, like we don't even, sometimes we're aware of it and sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we worked on this so that I could do that. And it's interesting. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it's exciting.
Yeah.
So what caused you to start writing your book, Stronger Than Broken?
Whew. Um, Being 100% blindsided by the fact that my husband of 25 years had decided to step outside of the boundaries of marriage. And when I discovered it, just, it was surreal. It couldn't possibly be happening to me. So I began writing through that, got the journal back out, dusted the journal off, and I wrote the book while it was happening and while we were doing the recovery. So the book is kind of raw. There's a little bit of bad language in there and some anger and angst and the recovery process and
Hmm.
so I think what made me turn it into a book and not just leave it as an unfinished journal is I showed it to a friend of mine who happened to be an editor, just out of giggles, is this book worthy? And he thought it really was. And in fact, when he read it, he said, this really makes me think about how women think. I'm going to treat my wife differently now.
Wow.
It's like a clear indication that, hey, maybe other people can think of their wives differently or heal from this or never do this in the first place. So just
Wow.
the
So because of that affirmation, then it was just like, okay, this is a message that people need. Hey, and so true.
Yeah. And it's just like any of the other movements that are out there, the Me Too movement and all of the movements. You think when something horrible is happening to you,
Mhm.
you really think it is only you, that this is only you. And when you start to confide in just one person, everybody comes out of the woodwork and says, wow, my husband cheated on me or my wife cheated on me and this is how we got through it or we didn't get through it.
Mhm.
Um, this is why we're divorced. And so many people crawled out of the woodwork and it made me relieved in one respect that, okay, it's not just me. We're all flawed. We're all human.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's
Mhm.
a message is it needs to be out there and especially when it comes to trying to get over it.
Definitely, definitely. And I know in my own story, Satan definitely used isolation to lure me further away, right? And it wasn't until I broke that and was like, wait, I need people, that then
Yeah.
God met me in a different way. So I can see in your story too, if to keep it under the rug or something doesn't work because there's so many people who need that information. And to even in the recovery process, you can't do it by yourself, right?
Well, and I think, yeah, to try to do it by yourself is impossible. And it just eats away at you like a cancer. And I'm one of those TMI people that
Mhm.
wear it hard on my sleeve, but at first I told no one because I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
Wow, I must not be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Not be sexy enough. I must not be the best wife I thought I was being. It was very embarrassing, very humbling. So when I did start to confide in one friend and my sister and maybe a second friend, and then when it started kind of creeping out from there, it did make me feel better. And writing about it absolutely, absolutely
Wow.
was the catalyst for the beginning of the recovery.
Wow. Yeah. So in your book, it's a novel then was what you've made. Is that
Yeah,
right?
so it's written like a novel. It's an
Okay.
easy read. It's not a how-to book. That comes later in my courses and coaching. More of a book of just one couple's journey through this event. So to protect everybody, I changed names and situations and the name of the bars we went to, or even the name of the pastor, although my pastor kind of laughed at me because he said, oh, I wouldn't have cared if my name was out there, because he was pretty important in the two of us coming together. And I think one of the things that's unique about our particular story is I'm a saved Christian, and he is kind of on the fence as to whether or not God exists. So I guess you could say biblically, I am unequally yoked. And so for him to say, for my husband to say, well, I guess we could talk to the pastor, that was huge for me.
For sure.
Huge. It really showed that he did want to fix it.
Yeah.
He didn't split up or divorce, and there was some remorse on his part.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. So obviously the character in your book is very real. And
Yeah.
so can you tell us how, like, some of your breakthroughs towards forgiveness? Because
Well,
I can't even
yeah.
imagine.
So the character is Michelle, and she chooses to forgive instead of throwing the marriage away like an old pair of running shoes. And one of the reasons she chooses to forgive is her faith, for
Mm.
sure. And and in my own life, my faith and the way my father raised me
Mm.
had a big impact. And he was one of those people that never let anything get him down. Our house burned down, and I remember saying, "Oh, aren't you upset about all the pictures and all the mementos and all of the expensive cameras and things that we lost?" And he said, I'm no longer ruled by stuff. And my brother passed away, which is in the other book. When my brother passed away, of course he grieved, and of course he was horribly torn apart.
Yeah.
But when he saw I wasn't healing, he pulled me aside and he said, "You know what? Your brother's death saved about 6 people's lives because he was an organ donor." And he just went on and on to rattle off all the benefits of something so tragic. And so I thankfully was raised by a man like that. And so when this horrible, horrible event occurred, I thought, well, there's got to be a way to grow from this. And if he gave me for all of the weird things I've done over the course of my life, I'd be a hypocrite not to forgive my husband.
Wow.
And that was very hard
Yeah,
to forgive her.
for sure. Wow. I thank you for that. That's a different take on things too. Like the reality of through this struggle, there will be benefits. It's this how God works, right? He redeems the junk in our
He
lives.
does.
He reveals
And you
what the
know what?
good is because we can't see it on our own often.
That's so true. And there was a little bit, and I know a couple of my Amazon reviews have said that I was a doormat, but I had to also forgive myself
Mm.
and my role in it. And, everybody that's ever been to a therapist or a marriage counselor or a coach has said, oh, it's never about the woman. It's never about you. It's about, your husband trying to validate himself in some other way. And
Mm.
it took so much pressure off of me. But then I kind of sat back and thought, but you know what? When we did go through the healing, a lot of stuff came up about he wasn't looking for the physical relationship. He was looking for an emotional connection. So I
Mm.
thought, I was always there for him physically. So I must not have been there for him emotionally because I was so busy with the kids and working and trying to fill any financial gap in our house and running here and there and everywhere and being chaotic. And honestly, I'm okay with taking a little bit of that blame for not being there for him emotionally.
Wow.
So Call me a doormat if you want, let the haters roll comments in.
Oh,
But I think there were 3 people involved in the affair, and there were three people I had to forgive.
there you go. Wow. That's amazing. And I mean, that's huge, right? When we acknowledge our own side of things, like in any situation, maybe it's just that our part is to forgive, or that we've held on to whatever. But yeah, there is a sense of, I need to forgive myself for not forgiving sooner. In my case, often is, it's like, I thought I forgave that person, but clearly I still have issues.
Oh, believe me, one of these sermons that we heard, the sermon that we heard the Sunday after I found his inappropriate text messages, the sermon was on forgiveness. And one of the things that was so beautiful was that the pastor said, we are allowed to forgive, but that doesn't always mean that we're going to forget. I think a lot of times people will say, oh, it's been 4 years, or it's been 8 years, or it's been 10 years, get over it. We never are completely over it. We through it.
Yeah.
And so I think that was kind of profound, that it's okay to forgive doesn't mean that we have to forget.
Yeah, and yet there's a different type of remembering, right? And that's the difference, is that you can go back to that incident and see the good, or see how God was at work, or what he has in mind for afterwards. Whereas
it's so true. So true. And you know what? Writing the book was so important to me because it got it out. And so if I wanted to have the violins playing and feel sad again, I can take it off the shelf. I can read a particular chapter. I can cry if I want to, and then put it back on the shelf and say, okay, that was just a chapter of my life. It doesn't define me. That was a chapter in my life. And it's amazing because now we are, I think, going on 9 years out from the actual event. And so I don't even take the book off the shelf anymore. I am, in that case, over it.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for your story. I mean, wow, brave to be willing to be that vulnerable with all of us. I really appreciate that. Can you, so if someone was sitting with you, what would you have, and then they were struggling with forgiveness about anything, what do you have a few takeaways that you would just really want people to know about forgiveness?
Well, one of the takeaways for sure, or one of the things that when I'm coaching somebody is really has to come from their heart. They can't just have a checklist and say, okay, I forgive him, I forgave her, and now what? What's the next step? It absolutely has to come from the heart. And again, most of the time, I really, really appreciate when people share how they came into the situation in the first place, because I think a lot of we just forget. We forget why we got angry at that person, or why we cheated on that person, or we forget where we started. And if I can bring back to where they started and see if there's anything left before we can start to forgive, that helps get the ball rolling to forgive.
Interesting.
And the other thing too is a lot of times, people aren't here to ask their forgiveness. I certainly wasn't going to call the woman and say, hey, I forgave you. I forgave her in my heart. But no reason for me to dredge up the past and to move forward in that way. So you don't always have to be a face-to-face forgiveness. It could be writing a letter. It could be saying a prayer. But it has to come from the heart.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. And you found that in your coaching that when people go back to the beginning of the situation, that helps their heart get in step with what needs to happen. Interesting. Wow.
Well, what I do is I do have an exercise that some people choose to do and some people choose not to, but I think most couples really enjoy doing this, is to, especially if they've been married for a long time, is to go back through the old-fashioned photographs. I know everything's on a disc now, or a file, or a cell phone, back and make a little scrapbook of all of the kissy smoochy pictures when you first dated. Always ask for stories. How did you meet? What was one of the funniest things that you loved about him when you first fell in love? Or what made you laugh, or what made you sing when you saw her come through the door? And what's kind of hilarious to me is a lot of times the things that we loved and fell in love with in the beginning are the things that annoy us now. You know, whether it's the way he flicks his hair or the way he squeezes the toothpaste out of the toothbrush tube. And just, it's funny to hear how we can get annoyed by the things that we first initially fell in love with.
Mm-hmm.
When they can look back at, okay, there's still something there, then I know hope. And,
Yeah.
you know, just one glimmer of something that those pictures and those stories bring about is, okay, now we can work on, well, where did we go wrong? And well, what happens then? And where, for me and my husband, it was a judgment. He judged me and I judged him. And so over the years, we built these little bricks of judgment up until that's where the emotional connection stopped, is because I had built up this wall of judgment and so had he. And when we could tear down that wall, oh my goodness, we have become best friends. And that was an element that may have been missing at the beginning of our marriage.
Wow. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for sharing. And I just really appreciate your vulnerability and even just these tips. It's been really just good to hear something new and fresh about forgiveness that I think that sometimes we haven't heard before. So people can get your book on Amazon. Is that right?
They can get it anywhere books are sold. Yes, indeed.
Excellent. Excellent. And if you could just maybe pass that link on to me, and I'll make sure it's posted here, and then people can purchase
Absolutely.
that.
And so I spell Stacey with an E, and I spell Greene with an E, so that the website's very easy to remember. It's greenecoaching.com.
All right.
Anyway.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.